Well, that's not great. Unfortunately, the last video that I put some time into did not save properly, so here is another one that's basically going to be the same thing that I hope is going to still be okay. So, what do I want to take away from what we've done this week, right? We've talked about communication. We've talked about the fact that we need to figure out sort of what communication looks like in order to process the theater of the absurd, right? One of the reasons why I want you to watch the video for The Bald Soprano before you read it is primarily for that reason. I think some things are more easily communicated on a stage, some are more easily communicated in a text, right? And I think that some, it requires both. So, with Ionesco versus Beckett versus Genet, I think we have three different examples of the way that communication works. In Beckett, we have communication that is often a mix of people talking to each other, generally understanding each other, having a conversation, even if that conversation is weird, right? That we could say, it feels like these people are talking about and having a conversation about a situation that just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And maybe their mindset is a little bit muddled, but they are still communicating with each other, right? And making sense with each other. I think within Genet, that we're going to see later on, right, the communication is almost crystal clear, right? There is a very clear line of communication, a clear line of what's happening, but the situation itself, right, is very bizarre. We see that there is deception, that there is a questioning of what is authentic, of what is really happening. We question what kind of scenario we are in and how it's supposed to work. It gives us a picture into authoritarianism and whether we can trust the government, whether we can trust what we see at all, which is great, terrifying, but, clearly communicated. And then we have Ionesco. And Ionesco presents, I think, the most interesting variety of the theater of the absurd in that people seem unable to communicate well and often seem incapable of making sense when they talk with each other. We will see that especially in plays like The Bald Soprano, which we're going to see, The Lesson, which we're not really seeing yet, in The Chairs, right, which also seems to be, a very absurd situation and communication issues, right? And then we have Rhinoceros, which we're going to see later on in the semester, which presents us with an entirely different sort of set of circumstances, trying to figure out what fascism is and how it works, and putting Rhinoceros, in the place of fascists. And so with these communication styles and the issues that they can present, I think it's important to know what we're going into in the next couple of weeks. We've seen the bleak. We're going to see sort of the terrifying and authoritarian, and the piece that sort of makes you say, ooh, this could be an interesting world to live in, or a terrifying one, right? And then we have, Ionesco sort of that's going to be sandwiching Genet, where the first time we encounter him, we do say, what is happening? How is this working? And we may find it to be funny. We may find it to be enjoyable. We may also just find it to be very annoying that none of these people make sense. It's overwhelming trying to make sense of something when it doesn't want to make sense. We don't understand what people are trying to do, and when we don't feel like there's a real conversation going on, I think it shows us how tiring it can be when we have to work at communication. I think it's a very valuable lesson. I think it's a well-illustrated point that Ionesco makes, and I'm excited to sort of see how we react to it as a class, right? It is a play I'd actually love to see performed, produced, and we'll talk more about it next week, right? When we actually watch it, or when we actually read the play, right? And talk through some of the scenarios that we're actually watching right the um, on the internet. So that's sort of where I want to end for today. It is the thing that I really want to that I want to get across, right? Is that humor is a lovely thing, but very closely connected with tragedy, with despair, with terror, and that when we think about humor, we are going to be, I think, processing it differently now than we have in the past. I hope. So, talk to you soon.